Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Recipe for Reality Small Bites, the series where I take a topic going on in the real Survivor show and do a spin off top 10 list or ranking video, or in this case, a very unique type of video, which is a casting video, which is going to be kind of constructed as my top 16 Survivor players I want to see on Big Brother. But really, what it is going to be me assembling a cast, a realistic, semi realistic cast of 16 competitors to play on a Big Brother season that have come from Survivor. Now, there was obviously a lot of debate because this is, a realistic cast. So I had to think about two big things. One, would they actually do Big Brother? And two, would it fill the diversity initiative? Because I think one of the biggest strides that CBS has taken as of late is, striving for a 50% diversity initiative with half the cast being, Black, Indigenous, or a person of color. So I wanted to really stay true to that in order to show my allegiance with that growth. But also it made for some tough cuts because a lot of the old school Survivor is very much not very diverse. It wouldn't get super diverse until the new era, but it also allowed for some really inspired and really interesting casting choices. Now, obviously, this isn't tied into any specific Survivor events, but because we missed Recipe for Reality now for 2 weeks, I figured let's give you double the small bites. So there will be a real Recipe for Reality Small Bites episode airing a little later with my top 10 exits from Survivor in inspiration of Annika, of course, on Survivor 47. But this one is kind of inspired by Big Brother ending and Survivor being, shown to have shown a few players kind of go over to Big Brother. Obviously, the biggest one being Cirie last season. So I figured this was like a cool idea and topic. So I did have a lot of honorable mentions. Obviously, I considered everyone and then kind of went through it and said, okay, would they do the show? Would they bring a lot to the show? Are they more suited for the house than the island and vice versa? And then I ultimately kind of sifted through it to create my cast of 16. So I'm going to go kind of season by season first and just tell you who I, kind of considered for this cast, starting with season 1, which I only really considered Richard Hatch just because of the iconography. Obviously, I think CBS would consider having the first Survivor winner on Big Brother, but ultimately I decided against it. In season 2, I considered Jerry and Colby for obvious reasons, similar to Richard, them being iconic figures. For season 3, I actually considered two people. I considered Lex and I considered T-Bird, but again, they just missed the cut. I just feel like of the old school players, they're just more iconic ones to choose from. From Survivor Marquesas, I actually considered two people that didn't make the cut. Sean Rector, who I think would bring a lot to any season he would be on, whether it be Survivor or Big Brother, and then Vecepia, who was a really tough cut for me because I would have loved to see what Vecepia's kind of under-the-radar Survivor game would be translated to Big Brother. But I did put on someone from Survivor Marquesas, so the first person making our cast of 16 is Boston Rob, because I feel like if you're to do a Survivor season or a Big Brother season of all Survivors, you gotta have Boston Rob. I think there's two big names that it's like, if you don't have these people on your cast, I don't think there's as much legitimacy, like, how do you not make Rob one of your 16 All-Stars, especially because he's willing to do other shows like Traders. He did Amazing Race. He's going to be doing Deal or No Deal Island, or he did Deal or No Deal Island. So I think he's a natural fit for Big Brother. I think a lot of people would be fascinated to see exactly what he would bring, so he made the cast here. Now, continuing along, I only considered Chian from Thailand, but let's be honest, no one from Thailand was going to make it. From the Amazon, I did consider Dina. I think she's an underrated player, but she just missed just because there are more notable names. Obviously, Rob Cesternino is someone I considered, but I just think he's so well ingrained into the RHAP community that, for him to be on Big Brother just as is, I don't see it happening. I think if anything, he would be on like a Celebrity Big Brother, which is an even shorter period, or on like a Survivor 50 if they're bringing back legends. I just think he's too well ingrained with all the new era people as well, to where I just don't think he would have a fair shot. And he's just so knowledgeable about Big Brother because he covers it literally every day. I mean, they do live feed updates, which he doesn't always partake in. It's Taryn doing the live feed updates, but Rob is always listening. So I feel like Rob just would kind of be done before he got there, so I didn't really consider Rob. And then for Pearl Islands, I actually considered two people, and one person made it on. I considered Johnny Fairplay, just because I thought it would be fun to see Johnny Fairplay on a Big Brother season, just to see what he brought to the season. But realistically, I don't know how likely it is that CBS would invite him first above all these other contestants. But someone from Pearl Islands, who's the other obvious pick that did make it on my cast, is Sandra. I mean, obviously, she went and did the Traders, and she showed that she was actually really good at the social strategy element of it. The problem is she was just too big a threat at the end that people just assumed she was the traitor and sniped her out. But in terms of running the house, she kind of ran a lot of the strategy. You think of the pool table strategy with the balls on the pool table. Like, I think she really has a knack for this kind of social strategy game in the confines of the Big Brother house, especially because, like Cirie, she's not a challenge threat on Survivor. So, like, it kind of eliminates that aspect to where, you know, she can focus primarily on social and strategic. And when she's well fed, I mean, like, I think Sandra could do a really, really dastardly good job on that show. So I did consider Sandra, and I put her on my cast. As for Vanuatu, I did consider Eliza. She obviously went on to do Amazing Race, so she'd probably be game to do Big Brother as well. She's also a politician, but I do think just with the bigger competitors and personalities that I did put on, I think Eliza just, you know, she's not as dramatic as some of our more dramatic casting choices that we went with. She's also not fitting the diversity initiative that I wanted to strive for, so I ultimately had to cut Eliza. Moving on to Palau, I only really considered one. It was a bit of a surprise who I considered, but it was Kobe Archa. I actually saw him do a Sequester Live kind of mini, and he was really fun to watch on it, and I think he would actually bring a lot of interesting chaos to the season. But again, he's just not as iconic enough where I would, you know, put him on a cast of 16 here for a prime Big Brother Survivor rep season. Moving on to Guatemala, I did consider a few people. I considered Rafe. I think he's a good strategist. I also consider Brian Corridan. I feel like he's well ingrained enough into reality TV still that, like, I think he would be very good at Big Brother. Just, again, he's a little too low-key here for this specific video. For Panama, obviously Cirie's off the board because she's already played Big Brother, but I did consider Shane. Obviously Shane would be a lot of fun to watch, but I also think, you know, you run the risk of having Evil Dick 2.0, which wouldn't be bad for TV's sake, but I think nowadays they wouldn't cast an Evil Dick type because of just how unpredictable and how, quite frankly, violent he was and crass. But I love Evil Dick for television purposes, but I don't know if they would take their same risk again with Shane. Parvati was obviously a really tough cut for Cook Islands, but I feel like, you know, we've been seeing so much of Parvati recently with Traders, and we're going to see her on Deal or No Deal Island, to where I was like, you know what, let her stay in that lane. Obviously, I did put Rob and Sandra on, so that's a little bit of a, you know, hypocritical statement, but I do think Parvati was off our screens for so long, and now she's making a resurgence on other shows, whereas Rob and Sandra are just such mainstays on everything that it almost feels like kind of routine to put them on. But I think Parvati is like that third big legend that people probably expect me to put on. But I also think this cast that I'm putting together has some newbies, but it also does have a lot of big legends and a lot of Winners at War representatives, and specifically a lot of women from Winners at War coming up. So I just felt like, you know what, it might have been overload to just put a bunch of just women who won Survivor and performed on Winners at War and you know, played on Winners at War on my list. So I was like, you know what, if Parvati has to be a cut, I'm okay because I know I'm going to see her on other shows. And then I cut Yul. I just don't think Yul's going to do another show unless it's a big charity season, which could be the case, but I don't want to bank on this being a charity thing, so I ultimately cut Yul. But moving on to Survivor China, I did put someone on from China. I did consider Frosty just because I feel like Frosty is maybe better suited for Big Brother than Survivor, but he's not a big enough figure for me to really consider him. And then PG would be a really fun addition onto Big Brother. She was, you know, a mid-cut when I went through like my second or third round of this list. I ended up cutting her just because I think there were stronger candidates, but the strongest candidate that I'm really excited to put on my list is Todd. Todd made the cast. I think, you know, it's time for Todd to return, and if he's not going to be on Survivor doesn't want him, we want him on Big Brother, because I think his style of gameplay could really suit the Big Brother house really well. I mean, you got to think about a lot of these players, like, would they be able to translate their Survivor games into the Big Brother house? And I think Todd can, in a similar way that Cirie did, you know, kind of wheeling and dealing behind the scenes, never being the biggest comp threat because he's smaller, less intimidating. He's also a little older now, so he could kind of fit almost like the chemo role, where he's just like this middle-aged gay guy who's just there to have fun and vibe, but he has a little bit of a sneaky side. But because he is charming and he does have this social ability, and he is a winner, obviously he's going to be able to charm the socks off of people as well. So I really think, you know, older, fresher Todd in the Big Brother house would be really intriguing to see. As for Survivor Micronesia, obviously I've covered all the seasons that the favorites are on, but as for the fans, the only one I really would have considered is Eric, but I don't think he wants to come back to reality television. Then we have to skip to Survivor Gabon, where, again, I didn't put anyone on, though I did pretty highly consider Kenny. I think Kenny's a real gamer, but honestly, I took a lot of, these casting ideas, and I realized I was picking a lot of like the under the radar gamer schemers like Todd, like Kenny, and I was like, you know what, I can't just have a season full of them, so I needed some bigger, more muscular, kind of more athletic types, so I ended up cutting Kenny, and then also Maddie was one I considered because of that athleticism angle, but ultimately didn't make the cut. Moving on to token teens, I considered Steven Fishback, but again, I think like Rob Cesternino, I think he's just comfortable doing the podcast thing, and I think Rob is likely to return for Survivor 50 if they ask him, whereas Steven wouldn't, and I don't think he would say yes to Big Brother because the reason he doesn't want Survivor 50 is because he wants to be with his kids. But ultimately, in my dream world, Steven Fishback would play Big Brother, but I don't think he wants to. Heroes vs. Villains, already covered those seasons, but moving on to Nicaragua, I really like the idea of some of these Nicaragua players playing. I actually considered 5 of them, and because I considered so many of them, I decided, you know what, I'm going to put one on the list. Who I considered that didn't make it from Survivor Nicaragua, Marty Payambo. I just think he's a little too old at this point, and because you have Boston Rob, who's now a little older, Todd's a little older, I feel like the older kind of more, Silver Fox type, like Sweet Kenny K, that's the last time I'll mention him on this one, but, I don't think Marty, I feel like his archetype is already filled by more notable people. Nayanka, I just don't know if CBS would have her back. I think she'd bring so much drama, so much intensity, but ultimately I had to cut her. Holly Hoffman would be a really fun, like, motherly figure on the season, but looking at who I'm about to cast in future seasons, I feel like the mother role is kind of covered. Also, you have Sandra on the season who's going to kind of fit that, so Holly was a tough cut. And then Fabio. I think Fabio actually would play really well on Big Brother. I think he kind of fits this kind of modern idea of, like, a good Big Brother player, but ultimately I went with one person from Nicaragua, and it is the person who's probably most likely to come back to a reality TV show, and it is Brenda. And I think Brenda kind of has a lot of the feistiness and sass that someone like Nayanko would bring, not to that extent, but also be warm enough, and she is a mother, so more motherly like Holly. She would have the vibes of Fabio, and she would have the strategy of Marty. So I figured like Brenda was like this good encompassing of all of them. Also to give a little bit of differentiation, not just from diversity standpoint, but also just like to have someone who's not a winner of this era, but a player who has played twice, is a notable player enough. I wanted to include her here, so I did put Brenda on just to also give some representation to Survivor Nicaragua, because I think it's a really good season, a very underrated season, I should say. It's not a very good season in context to the other seasons in comparison, but on its own, it's really enjoyable. I really do like it. As for Redemption Island, I only really consider Jim Rice. I've always liked Jim Rice's kind of mind and approach for the game, but I just don't see him making a cast like this when there are so many options. But moving on to South Pacific, I actually did put someone on. That is Sophie Clark. She is a big fan of the show. She is obviously a good strategist. She obviously can hold her own in challenges. She's a little bit older, so she kind of, differentiates the age gap a little bit, or the age diversity, I should say, in terms of age. Obviously, she's white, so she doesn't fit the diversity initiative. But I also really like just the idea of Sophie playing a Big Brother game, because she can really lean into those like calculated moves. But as we saw from Winners at War, I mean, that is really what sold me on her, because she showed that she has the ability to repeat, strategy, but also bring something new to her strategy at the same time. Obviously, the first season, she was kind of catering it around her cast. The second time, everyone was kind of a smart player, so she had to kind of rethink her strategy while still being the kind of unassuming person who strikes late, which was kind of what she did at South Pacific. But now she had to kind of replicate it with people who are much smarter than her, unlike her season with someone like Coach, that she could kind of fool at the end and kind of get the upper hand on. So I really like how Sophie emulated her game, but also switched it up in South Pacific. So I'd be really happy to see her return. And then the very next season, One World, I also put on Kim Spradlin. Again, we're seeing a lot of these winners from this era, because I think this produces some of the best all-around physical, social, strategic triple threats. I think people like Kim, people like Sophie really do just encompass all the great aspects and attributes of a Survivor player, but also feel like they could replicate that style of gameplay in a more confining environment like the Big Brother house. Now, are they going to be the best TV? Someone like Kim, someone like Sophie, probably not. Even though I do think Sophie also has some wit and humor that I really like. She reminds me of my aunt in that way. Rest in peace, Aunt Kim. Love you. Speaking of Aunt Kim, though, Kim Spradlin, also one of the best strategists. I actually just saw a Q&A Instagram Live with Corey Wartenberger, who famously played Big Brother, and he said of all the Survivor players who he would want to see play Big Brother the most is Kim. And originally Kim wasn't on my list, and then when I saw that, I was like, you know what? Maybe Kim would be a really good fit for Big Brother. And then, I thought about it, and I said, you know what? I'm putting her on my list because she is probably the best one-time female player we've ever seen. Obviously, she returned, but on her first game, she played the best first game of any woman on Big Brother, or on Survivor. So I was like, you know what? Let's see if she can replicate it in the Big Brother house. Let's see if she can take what she's done so successfully on Survivor and replicate it indoors. So I'm a big fan of that idea. As for Survivor 25, I actually didn't put on anyone from Philippines, surprisingly enough. And on for Caramoan, I also did not put on anyone. I considered Reynold and Eddie just because I feel like they kind of fit that kind of bro-like casting choice that Big Brother would do, but ultimately I did not pick them. As for Blood vs. Water, I also didn't put anyone on. I did consider Cirie Easton just because she is a good strategist, but I feel like when you have someone like Brenda, who's a little bit more of the villainous strategist, you also have people like Kim and Sophie who are good strategists, and Sandra. I just feel like there wasn't a spot for Cirie. As for Cagayan, I considered a lot of people for Cagayan. The big elephant in the room is obviously Tony, and also probably Sarah at this point. I think Tony and Sarah would both be pretty good on Big Brother, but I've had enough big heavy-hitting legends and enough people who play similar games, but I feel like are a little bit more low-key that could fit and blend in with the Big Brother strategy elements slightly more. Like, I feel like if Tony were out there, he'd be the first one out just because, if he lost a challenge, he's just too big a personality to kind of confine in four walls. And then Sarah, kind of the same thing. I think we've seen all we need to see from Sarah. She did the challenge. I think the more extreme, more outdoorsy games are more their cup of tea. I did consider Jatia just because of the drama. I think it'd be a lot of fun. And I considered Chaos Cass, because I think Cass would bring a lot to the season as well. But I did go with someone else from Survivor Cagayan, and that is someone who should be an obvious pick at this point if you listen to the Survivor podcast, and that is Bryce Isaiah, formerly known as Bryce Johnston on the show. So when I do my Brand Steel later, you'll see him as Bryce Johnston. But Bryce is such a great character, and obviously he was a pre-merger, so people are probably saying, like, why would he put a pre-merger here on Survivor? But I wanted to have at least one pre-merger on the men's side and one pre-merger on the women's side. Spoiler alert, I have two pre-mergers from the men's side coming up, or one more coming up. But Bryce had to be a pick here. I just think his electric personality is evident in all his watch parties, all his podcasts, and looking at this cast, I'm like, I need Bryce on reality TV again, and I think Big Brother would be a really good fit for him. I think he is, probably physical enough to win some of the challenges that are a little bit more well-rounded in comparison to Survivor, which is very physically demanding. And I think he has the social and strategic capital. We've seen it with just his interactions with people and the way he communicates with people. I think it'd be a lot of fun to watch. Moving on to Samuel Del Sur, I considered Kelly Wentworth, obviously. She's a great figure of Survivor, but there were just other people in her archetype. I also considered Reed, who I think would be a really fun villain on a Big Brother season, but there were just not enough spots. And other people that kind of fit his archetype, like someone like Todd, even Bryce would kind of fit that as like the schemy, kind of gay, sassy archetype, which, again, I hate that I can only limit myself to so many, but Big Brother always deals in archetypes, so I wanted to kind of disperse it a little bit. But I did put on someone else from Samuel Del Sur, and it's the last of our winners for the women. There's still one more winner for the men, but I did put on Natalie. I just think for the sake of just seeing how someone so physical on the women's side could handle the Big Brother house, like, is she going to be able to compete in those challenges as well? But I also think, her feistiness and her sass is underrated at this point, where we forget just how much she combated some of the people in her original season, like John Rocker, and then obviously just all the kind of strategic moves she made at the end. But there was always an edge to her, and we even heard about it on the Edge in Edge of Extinction for Winners of War. Now, I've heard some unpleasant things about Natalie's experience, or people's experience with Natalie on Edge of Extinction in Winners at War, but I think that gives more incentive to put her on a season like Big Brother, because you want that drama, you want that chaos, and especially from someone who's going to win challenges, who's going to probably be in HOH once or twice. You put her on with people she played with, like Kim and Sophie and Sandra and Rob, and see how that goes. I think it'd be very fascinating. So I definitely wanted to see Natalie here. From Survivor Co-Wrong, I only really considered Aubrey. I think Aubrey is another strategist I would love to see on Big Brother, but I just have so many spots, and only so many spots. So Aubrey didn't make the cut. Same with Millennials vs. Gen X. I didn't really have anyone from that season make it on, though I did consider 5 men from that season. Zeke, who I think is a great strategist, but almost kind of seems done with reality TV at this point. Brett, who I think would be a lot of fun as kind of one of those older figures on the season, but when you have people like Boston Rob who are now older, someone like Todd who is a little older now, I don't think you need that kind of like middle-aged man archetype from Brett, and I think there are just stronger people in his field. Same with like Jay. I feel like the young kind of athletic guy is going to be covered by a few other picks on this list. David Wright, I just don't know if he would do it. He's just so in love with the Survivor game that I feel like he'd be good on Big Brother, but I feel like Survivor really is his fit, especially given his story and how that went. And then Adam, who I think is a tough cut as well. I just feel like someone like Todd fits the Adam archetype a little bit stronger, and I'd probably rather at this point see Todd back than see Adam play a third game, even though this is the first game of both of theirs for Big Brother. But I just think, it's been so long since we've seen Todd, so between Todd and Adam, that's how Adam got cut. But now it's time to like actually just start filling out some more spots, because I think a lot of my casting choices come from these 30s and 40s seasons. We're going to be starting it here with Heroes versus Healers versus Hustlers, where I did mention I do have a pre-merger woman on this list, and I went with Elliott, which may be a bit of an obscure casting pick, but when I looked at it, I first had to fit the diversity quota. So I was like, who would be a very inspired pick that would also fit within the diversity guidelines? And I was looking at someone like who actually feels like they could benefit from playing Big Brother over Survivor. And I looked at Allie as someone who, just based on Survivor, she never got her footing because she just got swapped on the worst tribe. She just was dealt a bad hand being on Patrick's tribe to begin with, and then in the swap, she just didn't end up on a side where the numbers favored her. As for something like Big Brother, there are no tribes. So Big Brother, you can make your own numbers. You can make your own alliances. You have a pool of 16 to work with, not a pool of 5 or 6. And I feel like for someone like Allie, she has the most to gain from switching from Survivor to Big Brother in a similar way that like Bryce does for the men. I feel like Allie would be a really fun choice. I really liked her on Survivor, but I always felt like maybe Big Brother might be her game. So she's kind of my one big kind of wild card that I don't feel like a lot of people would expect me or anyone to put on a Big Brother season from Survivor, but I also think she's a notable enough pre-merger to where I think enough people at least would recognize her and be like, oh yeah, I remember her. And you know what? I think it just makes for a more fun video here because I'm not just picking legend after legend after legend. As for season 36, Ghost Island, I did consider Kellen, but again, there's just so many people in that kind of smart, strategic, nerdy girl type, and obviously I'm going to pick someone like Sophie over someone like Kellen in that case. But I did put on one person from Ghost Island, and that is one of the men. You need at least a few jocks, and there's no better jock that I feel like would be more fun to watch fail on the live feeds than Chris Noble. So I put Chris Noble on. I just feel like he epitomizes this kind of like surfer bro, beach bro, Big Brother player. I feel like he would be a lot of fun in the DRs. I feel like he could give us like a Tucker-like game if you watch this most recent season of Big Brother, like Tucker, where he's just kind of making these wild and crazy decisions, or he could flame out like someone like a Devin, for example, who just gets too strong, too headstrong early on. There's one other huge personality that I feel like would combat against Chris or work with Chris later on. We'll get there when we get there. That I just find Chris on a Big Brother season to be a really intriguing prospect. Moving on now to David versus Goliath. I actually did put on one person from David versus Goliath. It was tough not to put on a plethora of people because I considered Mike White, I considered Angelina, I considered Kara. I like Kara a lot. I think Big Brother would be a lot of fun for her style of gameplay. I consider Christian, obviously, but like Christian is such a Survivor person in my brain. Like the fact that he is this nerd, but he can also win these challenges. Like I feel like Christian on Big Brother would just be kind of sniped out early because he very clearly comes across very smart. Same as Gabby, she was just a tough cut late in the game. Natalie Cole would be really fun to watch on Big Brother, but ultimately I had to cut her just to make way for other people. But the person from Survivor, David vs. Goliath, I put on is Davey himself, because I really love Davey, and he was an alternate on Traitors, supposedly, and he didn't get to go on Traitors, and I really want to see him in kind of this kind of different environment that isn't Survivor. I always felt like Davey wasn't like the island type. Like I always kind of imagined him kind of like sitting around on the couches, kind of whispering, making moves in the Big Brother house, more than I even see him on an island setting. But he clearly did very well on the island for Survivor. So I feel like it'd be a lot of fun to see him on a Big Brother season. Next, we've got Survivor Edge of Extinction. There's only one person I really consider, and that is Victoria. But I think I'm a bigger Victoria fan than I feel like the fandom is, to where I think if she were to return on Survivor, let alone Big Brother, people would be like, who? Even like Allie, who is a pre-merger, I feel like has at least a little bit of a presence, whereas Victoria was very under-edited, but I was always a Victoria truther, so I will always bring her up if I can. As for Island of the Idols, I don't think they're bringing on anyone from Island of the Idols. I think they'd just rather let that season die at this point. The only person I could see them bringing back is like Jamal, maybe. I think Dean would be a lot of fun because of the advantages and all that stuff that he had on Survivor. I think it plays well with the twists on Big Brother, but I'm not going to put Dean on a cast list. I just wasn't the biggest Dean fan. Tommy, same thing. I feel like other people could kind of play Tommy's game. He kind of could have like an Andy Herron like game, not just because they're redheads, but I also considered Jason Linden, but at this point, I really don't think they would put anyone from Island of the Idols on. The only person I could see returning at all is like Janet on Survivor 50, but even at this point, she's getting a little older, and I hope they, make that happen before it's too late for her to play again. But now we made it to the new era, and I've considered obviously a lot of these people because these are the people that are freshest on people's minds. So rattling it off real quick, starting with Survivor 41, I didn't put anyone on from Survivor 41, but I did consider Voce. I think he is someone who has a lot of potential. I also considered Shan, obviously a huge character, but I again feel like there are other people in her archetype. Like I feel like Sandra would play a very Shan game. I feel like Natalie could be cutthroat like Shan. I just feel like Shan, we saw what we could have seen from her on Big Brother when we saw her on the challenge, and honestly she was a little underwhelming for me on the challenge. Moving on to 42, I did consider Jenny Kim. I feel like she's obviously a robbed Giadis. I considered Hai. I considered Omer. Obviously all these great strategists that I think could have really good potential in the Big Brother house. I ultimately didn't pick Omer because I picked another person from this season. And I also wanted to put Marianne on, but I just, again, ran out of spots, and I honestly think Marianne is so Survivor to me, where I almost want to keep her in Survivor. Like, I don't want to see her go through the torture of Big Brother to an extent. Like, I think Marianne's so precious that I don't know if I want to watch her struggle in the live feeds, because she's just such a happy person. I feel like Big Brother does something to people who go in with these big, uplifting, positive spirits. Like, I think it's very hard to not come out kind of, unfazed, if you will. But regardless, I would have loved to see Marianne, but I didn't ultimately put her on. But who I did put on, should be no surprise, his brother played, so I want to see what Zack Wartenberger has to do on Big Brother. Again, a pre-merger, so like obviously the chances are a little slimmer than someone else. Like obviously Boston Rob's going to get the call before Zack Wartenberger is, but I do think it could be fun, seeing Corey's brother. Is he able to do as well as Corey did? Is he able to do better? Or is he going to do as well as he did on Survivor and be out first? Who knows? I really don't know if production loves Corey as much as I think the fandom does. Even the fandom, I think, is very split on Corey. But I think just the prospect of like having a Big Brother's relative, Big Brother's quite literal Big Brother on Big Brother, I think it's enough for me to at least consider it and put him on my fan cast, because I do think he would accept the call, obviously. Moving on to 43, I didn't end up putting on anyone, but I did consider Cassidy. I think she showed in the challenge that she actually does have the prowess to be a very entertaining presence that isn't just a rooting interest, but also kind of can create a little bit of conflict, which we always love to see on Big Brother. As for 44, I actually did put on someone from 44. I think the obvious two people would think about are Carolyn and Jam Jam, but I ultimately cut Carolyn. One, because I know I'm going to see her on the Traders soon, so at least I'm going to get something of Carolyn indoors that isn't Survivor. And two, I just feel like of her and her counterpart, I just think he is the more likely to succeed at the game of Big Brother. I feel like Carolyn, on Survivor in a shorter term game is better than like if you were to lock Carolyn in a house for 100 days. But who I think could do really well is her partner in crime, who I did put on this cast, and that is Jam Jam. I think Jam Jam is a slam dunk casting choice on any reality TV show, but especially Big Brother. If they were to do Survivor and Big Brother, I think Jam Jam is like top 3 names that are like first to get the call. Like I think they would call Rob and Sandra, and then they'd probably, of this list that I'm compiling, I think they would call it Jam Jam, because Jam Jam is just the essential personality you want on a show like Big Brother. So I obviously put Jam Jam on. As for 45, I did have a lot of considerations, and the person I chose might be a little bit surprising, but who I did consider, I obviously considered Brandon Donlin. I think he obviously was not fit for Survivor, but I think his overall social strategy ideas could translate well to Big Brother, but ultimately because of his showing on Survivor, I don't know how likely CBS would want him back in any capacity. I also considered Drew, who's very smart, obviously coming off of the Jeopardy high, Caleb, who's a big social threat, but again, feels a little bit more too Survivor than Big Brother. I also thought about Katura, who obviously brought a lot to her Survivor season. Jake, who was a lovable character who I would love to have on any season of any show, but it just ultimately became a tough cut. And then obviously Dee. I think Dee is like the epitome of like the new era of Survivor, to where I almost kind of want to keep her there. But it would be cool to kind of put Dee on the show with a bunch of the older, old school women who have won the game. Also put her on a season with like Boston Rob and Jam Jam and see how she does. And Todd, a lot of other winners, but I ultimately did have to cut her. But who I did put on the show would be a bit of a surprise, but I think when you think about the Big Brother casting choices, it makes a lot of sense. And that is Kendra from Big Brother 45. And the reason is, I think, all the astrology stuff, kind of her having this really kind of like quirky voice and like thinking about astrology, she was not a huge personality on Survivor, but I feel like it's because Survivor, especially Survivor 45, was all about the cutthroat strategy, the alliances. Bruce really dominated a lot of like the kind of zany character moments on that season, to where I feel like a lot of the other characters weren't really big characters. Even someone like Emily and Caleb, it was more about their journeys. The Reba 4, it was about their journeys. And then you have Kendra, who I feel like they could have really milked, but because she didn't go far in the season, we didn't get as much character from her as we should have. And I think for Big Brother, having Kendra, who's like, kind of the spiritual kind of astrology girl, a little quirky, she's clearly the life of a party, but also has some strategic regimen because of how she was able to strategize with the other women on her season. I think Kendra is someone who really actually would be a great fit for Big Brother. So I thought, this is a very inspired choice. This is probably the most random new era pick, even more random than Zack Wartenberger, but I do think if you think about it, Kendra, of all the players on 45, feels the most fit for something like Big Brother, at least in my opinion. Moving on to 46, though, I actually did put two people from Survivor 46 on the cast, and it is the two biggest characters, but we do have to rattle off some honorable mentions. I considered Jelinski, but ultimately didn't make the cut. I'm already putting Zack on. I'm not going to put another first boot on. I considered Tevin. I think Tevin would be a lot of fun in the Big Brother house, but I think also someone like Bryce kind of fits his archetypes, even someone like Jam Jam in terms of the social player. Venus, again, would rub a lot of people the wrong way. But I think that'd be a lot of fun, though ultimately I think there are enough villainous women to kind of fulfill that quota. And then Charlie, who I thought was a really fun presence on Survivor. I just don't know if he would be as entertaining on Big Brother. He's clearly a good strategist, but I feel like all the men that I've named so far at least have that entertainment value. Even someone like Davey, who's a lot more chill, has a very high entertainment value, whereas Charlie's fun to watch, but I feel like he's more fun because of his strategy than he is like this just you can't turn the TV off type personality. Now, who does fit that personality is Q, and I had to put Q on this cast. Even though Q, for me, feels, lives, breathes Survivor, how do you not give Q the call to Big Brother? If you're doing a Survivor Big Brother season, he's probably the most popular, at least the most talked about new era player, maybe next to only Carolyn and Jam Jam, of people that like people just want to see again just to see what would happen. And I think if you were to put him in a house, the big mistake and the Q skirt, Big Brother always loves to play around with costumes, so I feel like Q would, get a punishment with a costume and be really miserable, and it'd be a lot of fun, it'd be hilarious to watch. And then you also have like, the hide and seek thing. Like, how would that work in hide and go veto, everyone trashing the house? How would Q react? I don't think Q would do well on Big Brother, but I need to see how he would do regardless. And then another person from 46 that I put on, also in a similar vein, I don't think would do very well at Big Brother, but I need to see what she would do with a bunch of people in a house, and that is Liz. Like, what would Liz Wilcox bring to Big Brother? I need to know. So I think of all the huge personalities on 46, Venus, Tevin, Jelinski, I think Liz and Q on Big Brother would be just the creme de la creme, mwah, chef's kiss. And then, 47, it's too early. I can't just say, one of these 5 pre-mergers should be on Big Brother. It's just not fair until we've seen the season play out. Though, right now, I would consider John Lovett, but I don't think he wants to go on Big Brother, especially because it is such a long time commitment, so I didn't ultimately put him on. I didn't put on anyone from 47, but there you go. There's the cast. I'm going to recap it one last time. For the men, we have Boston Rob Mariano, we have Todd Herzog, and we have Jam Jam for the winners. We also have Bryce Isaiah, Chris Noble, Davey Rickenbacker, Zack Wartenberger, and Q Burdett. As for the women, we have a bunch of winners. We have Sandra Diaz-Twine, Kim Spradlin, Sophie Clark, Natalie Anderson, and then we also have Brenda Lowe, Allie Elliott, Kendra McQuarrie, and Liz Wilcox. And for fun, of course, I had to simulate it on Brant Steele, and it actually was a very interesting season. As we see here, Kim defeated Rob in the finals, which is like so iconic because it's like one of the biggest figures of Survivor. Boston Rob loses to probably the best one-time winning game ever in Survivor, Kim. And it was a close jury vote. It was 5-4 in the end. Like, that's what you want. You want to see like the two best go at it in the end. And as we see with this cast, it was a very interesting outcome. Allie, obviously, maybe a dud of a pick, because I thought she could have a lot of promise on this season, but she comes in 16th. Obviously, I predicted a Q flame out. I'm a little bit surprised Davey went so early, and Sophie. Maybe they were just a little too chill under the radar. Todd going out early doesn't surprise me. He is a good strategist. You got to take him out. And then you get the heavy hitters. You get Natalie, Jam, Sandra, all these big players. Sandra's the first juror. That makes a lot of sense. Wait for her to get to jury, then snipe her out before she can get any further. Then you have like the more like character-y picks like Liz. Zack make it about the mid-merge. Zack actually places one place better than his brother, so he'll never let Corey live that down. Brenda getting 6 makes sense. This is around where double eviction is, so I would not be surprised if she goes out around that point, just being kind of this under the radar sneaky sniped out threat. And then Chris Noble who ended up I looked at the comp stats, actually winning a lot of vetoes, so he's probably like one of those people that they kept trying to get rid of and then had to wait till the end when they could snipe him out when he finally lost, kind of like Michael a few seasons ago. And then Kendra makes 4th. That makes a lot of sense. She's just kind of a social kind of character, almost like Rubina on this season, where like she's not really a big active strategist. And Bryce was the surprise because I was looking at the stats. Bryce won the most competitions of this simulated season. So seeing Bryce do well made me happy because I think it shows the potential that was not there for Survivor. So while it didn't work for Allie, I think it worked for Bryce and Zack to show that Big Brother might be more suited for them. But it ended up being Kim who won the final HOH, sniped out Bryce, because I guess Bryce was the biggest threat at that point, took Rob, and I guess people didn't like Rob enough to give him the win, because Kim wins over him. And then who is your America's favorite? It is Zack, which is kind of a cool full circle moment, because Corey didn't get to win that one, so maybe Zack can brag about that to his brother as well. So it was a really fun season to simulate. I'm really happy I did this. I think it's a cool experiment, especially taking in diversity and taking in old versus young and old era versus new era. I thought this was a really fun experiment. So if they were to ever do a season of Big Brother, I think this would be an ideal cast. Obviously, you can sub some people out. Obviously, I would have liked to have like Eliza on there. I would have liked to have like Natalie Cole maybe fitting in there. Maybe Tevin. These players that I think could also be really great Big Brother players. Bring back Cirie again. Bring her back every season if you can. But that is the video. Thank you guys so much for watching this, and if you like experimental videos like this, let me know, because I'm trying to a bunch of different formats for Recipe for Reality Small Bites. As I said, I apologize. We haven't been able to record our mainstay show now in 3 weeks, which is very sad for me. Just Zack is very busy. I'm pretty busy, so you will be getting it soon. So we wanted to release 2 videos for you for Recipe for Reality Small Bites. So there's another one coming up later with the top 10 most iconic Survivor exits of all time, inspired by Annika. So thank you all for watching, and subscribe to the Dill Pickle Movie Network for more. Thanks.